The world has witnessed cases of human rights abuses, and according to Amnesty International's latest annual audit of human rights, leaders have pushed hate, fought against rights, ignored crimes against humanity, and have let inequality and suffering spin out of control.
In Nigeria, publisher of Sahara Reporters, Omoyele Sowore, is the face of human rights this period. In the meantime, the Department of State Services has sent a delegation to the Federal High Court to apologize for their invasion of the court as Mr. Sowore appeared before the judge. Lead counsel to Mr. Sowore confirmed this to TVC News.
Now, this revelation comes 2 days after the DSS denied invading the courtroom to arrest Mr. Sowore. The Secret Service had said its men were stationed outside, and the pandemonium in the court was caused by Mr. Sowore's supporters.
I think after the denial, I want to believe that the State Security Service was confronted with the actual reality and then came to the conclusion that the most honorable thing to do in the circumstance was to apologize. And I've confirmed that this afternoon, a powerful delegation of the agency of the State Security Service visited the headship of the leadership of the Federal High Court to apologize for the invasion of the court on Friday. I had already informed Nigerians yesterday that indeed an apology was tendered on Friday in my presence over the unfortunate invasion of the court. And I do hope that 2 senior journalists who have spoken on behalf of the government and have bought or swallowed hook, line, and sinker the earlier press statement by the State Security Service to the effect that, oh, the whole thing was made up, she arrest people, were still managing what happened on Friday, will have to apologize to Nigerians if indeed they are made to realize that the management of the State Security Service had in fact gone to the judiciary to apologize for the invasion of the court on Friday.
All right, Femi Falana, lead counsel to Mr. Sowore, speaking there. Joining us now is a lawyer, Ini Behe Effiong. He's also a human rights activist. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast. There have been concerns been raised about the shrinking civic space in Nigeria, and questions have arisen if Nigeria is really interested at upholding the tenets of human rights.
That's correct. And in deprecating what has now become the infamous tendency of this regime to violate the rights of Nigerians, with specific reference to the case of Omoyele Sowore. A brief historical context is apposite that the political party that is at the helm of affairs today, both the party and the principal officers, the prominent leaders of this party have in the past been themselves victims of human rights abuse. In 2003, following the presidential election that the General Buhari lost, Mr. Femi Falana went to court at the request of the president and leaders of his party to challenge the tear gassing of the then General Buhari and members of the ANPP following their loss at the presidential election. Mr. Femi Falana went to court, and the court agreed with him and nullified the requirement of the police, the Public Order Act, that police permit is required to protest. So Buhari's rights was violated. He ordered that the matter should go to court. He won. The Court of Appeal upheld his right to protest. Also recall that the All Progressive Congress, during the 2015 election, their secretariat in Lagos was invaded by officials of the same agency, the State Security Service. Computers and other gadgets were gutted away. Malam Gabasha, who has now issued a statement defending human rights violation, His residence was also violated by the State Security Service and was deprecated when they were in opposition. The current governor, El-Rufai, went to Anambra State during the election that his candidate, the current Minister of Labor, contested. And he was held and detained in a hotel. He went to court. I can confirm to you that just recently, the Court of Appeal upheld his fundamental right and agreed that his right was violated. I can give several other examples. But the point I am making is that when this government is detaining Omoyele Sowore against several court orders admitting him to bail, this is the same government that has in the past. People in this government themselves have been victims of human rights abuse. And we should never tolerate a situation where a judge exercising his constitutional power under Section 6 of the Constitution, giving an order that the President, the SSS, and all authorities and persons in Nigeria are constitutionally mandated under Section 287 of the Constitution to enforce. And that order is being flouted. You now have an invasion, armed invasion. And it is now good to place on record, as Mr. Femi Falana has said, that they have now apologized. They had actually apologized on that day. They have now gone further to apologize again. But we are saying that in the regime of human rights, it is not enough to apologize because the then acting president, Professor Yemi Osibanjo, sacked the then DG of the SSS, Lawal Daura, for the invasion of the National
Assembly.
Why is it that we now have an invasion? We saw the whole world has seen that the Federal High Court was invaded. The Federal High Court was invaded.
All right. Now,
and nobody has been fired, nobody has been suspended, nobody has been disciplined. This is the worst violation of human rights in our recent history.
And Nigerians expect something to be done about that. Now, the civil society organizations have come to give a 14-day ultimatum to government, and they're demanding different things. One of them is the immediate release of Omoyele Sowore. What impact will that have on, because when it comes to being a pressure group, they only remain a pressure group and a suggestion to government?
Apart from, I endorse wholly the position and the resolutions of the Nigerian civil society. I also want to place on record that apart from the civil society, the National Human Rights Commission has publicly and on record deprecated the despicable action that took place at the Federal High Court on the 5th of December. The National Human Rights Commission, and that is pursuant to the National Human Rights Commission Amendment Act, that has now given the Commission further powers to be totally independent. So this is a federal government agency stating that the federal government did something wrong. So we are saying, Mr. President, that you swore to uphold the Constitution, to preserve, to protect the provisions of the Constitution. And you are the president because the Constitution recognizes your right to be the president. If that same Constitution gives the court the power to enforce the rights of Nigerians, and people go to court and get an order, you have a duty to enforce that order. Otherwise, the country is going to go into complete state of anarchy. And the president and all political institutions will be victims. So for us to prevent that, we must insist on human rights, we must insist on adherence to the rule of law, and we must continue to say that never must Nigerians be a conquered people, and that this country should not degenerate to a total banana republic.
It's okay. We look forward to greater days for the country and for Nigerians. Thank you very much, Inibe Heffiong, for your insight.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're watching TVC Breakfast. The world has witnessed cases of human rights abuses, and according to Amnesty International's latest annual audit of human rights, leaders have pushed hate, fought against rights, ignored crimes against humanity, and have left inequality and suffering spin out of control.
In Nigeria, publisher of Sahara Reporters, Omoyele Sowore, is the face of human rights at this period. And while the Department of State Services has sent a delegation to the Federal High Court to apologize for their invasion of the court as Mr. Sowore appeared before the judge.
Lead counsel to Mr. Sowore confirmed this to TVC News. This revelation comes 2 days after the DSS denied invading the courtroom to arrest Mr. Sowore. The Secret Service had said its men were stationed outside, and the pandemonium in court was caused by Mr. Sowore's supporters.
I think after the denial, I want to believe that the State Security Service was confronted with the actual reality and then came to the conclusion that the most honorable thing to do in the circumstance was to apologize. And I've confirmed that this afternoon, a powerful delegation of the agency of the State Security Service visited the headship of the leadership of the Federal High Court to apologize for the invasion of the court on Friday. I had already informed Nigerians yesterday that indeed an apology was tendered on Friday in my presence over the unfortunate invasion of the court.
Femi Falana there, the lead counsel to Omoyele Sowore. Now, Nigeria joins the rest of the world to come to celebrate Human Rights Day. We asked Mr. Falana where he would place Nigeria on the human rights violation scale or index. All right, we will certainly bring you his response to that. We have in the studio a lawyer, Efyong, and he is one of the persons who have been advocating as well for human rights over the years, and we're glad to have you join us right now.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank
right.
you. Good morning.
Now, let me start. The Nigerian Constitution, Chapter 14, spells out all the rights to life, rights to freedom of expression, and rights to everything. But are all rights absolute? Make us understand that first before we break into where there's a violation or not.
Well, the fundamental rights guaranteed under Chapter 4 of the Constitution are not absolute. Indeed, by virtue of Section 45 of the Constitution, the principle of derogation from fundamental rights is constitutionally entrenched and enshrined to the extent that the rights that are guaranteed can be deprived. There are exceptions to those rights in limited circumstances, depending on the peculiar facts of each case. I'll give you an example. Under Section 33 of the Constitution, there is a constitutional and fundamental right to life, for which every person is entitled. But that right can be derogated from. That right can be taken away where a person is convicted of an offense for which the punishment carries the sentence of death. And indeed, that person can be executed under our current constitutional regime. Again, in an attempt to suppress insurrection and riot, the Constitution also envisages a possibility that one can be deprived of his right where law enforcement agencies are left with no option than to resort to use of force. And I caution proportionate use of force in suppression of riot. Again, you also have situations where Nigeria is in armed conflict. The right to life is also limited. Under state of emergency, fundamental rights and human rights can also be limited. One also, for example, has the right to freedom of movement. There are circumstances under which that right can be derogated from. So there is no argument that there are no absolute rights. But the point we will constantly make is to say that before we can speak of derogations, before arguments can be made on exceptions to this right, we must state clearly and acknowledge that these rights actually exist.
All right. And in Nigeria, these rights actually exist, especially as it's expressed in Section 4, like you have rightly mentioned. Chapter 4 of the Constitution. But when you place it side by side, recent happenings across the country, how would you evaluate, or where would you place where Nigeria stands now when it comes to human rights?
The record is unimpressive. The record as of today is frightening. And I dare say it is one that is intolerable. We have a situation where the current administration has consistently and demonstrably so shown Nigerians that human rights is taking the back stage in the country. And I'll give you examples. Beyond the Sowore case, we have seen invasion unparalleled in our recent democratic history of media houses in this country. We have seen closure of broadcast stations. in contravention of Section 39 of the Constitution that allows freedom of expression, in breach of Section 22 of the Constitution that guarantees independence of the media. We have seen journalists being detained on account of their reports. We have seen people being kept incommunicado in solitary confinement, like, for example, the case of John Zabiri, who was detained for 2 years without trial. You cannot have that in a constitutional democracy. We have seen a situation where Nigerians have been constantly deprived of socioeconomic rights. Beyond fundamental rights, we also have socioeconomic rights. Today, Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world. These things have bearing on human rights because one must live to be able to work, to be able to express oneself. The employment rate in the country is very worse, very bad. That has effect on the rights of Nigerians. We have political rights where the civic space is being shrunk by the day. The capacity of Nigerians to articulate their grievances is being deprived, is being limited by the government. We are now seeing the worst form of it, where the principle of the rule of law, propagated by Professor Evidice, which has 3 components, namely respect for human rights, equality before the law, and supremacy of the law. These things are being derogated. We are now seeing courts of law being invaded. We are now seeing judgments and orders of court, like in the case of Sowore, being treated with absolute contempt. So when we speak of human rights in Nigeria, the question has to be asked, is this regime, is the Nigerian state really interested in enforcing the rights of Nigeria?
All right,
that's
a big question, $1 million question that everyone has to ponder over. And one has, it's always on record that Nigeria has not really fared well over the years, even through the days of military and so on, when it comes to human rights. But we have to leave it here now. Inibehe Effiong, thank you so much for your insight into this.